Hey everyone, welcome to That's Not Proper, and I'm your host, Corey Asuncion. Today, episode 5 of That's Not Proper, I'm going to be talking about why I excommunicated myself from church and Christianity in general. I'm going to be talking about judgment and hypocrisy and hatred. I'm going to discuss fear-based indoctrination, and I'm also going to be touching down on sex. I'm sitting here this morning having a cup of coffee. Actually, I'm on my second or third cup of coffee. It's cold, man. If I have to go put on a robe and socks and pajamas that are long sleeve and long pants and still am cold, it's freaking cold. I don't care where you live. It's cold. I hate it. And here's the other thing though. I won't turn the heater on unless it's like really, really cold because I'm cheap. So it's October. End of the year's coming up, and I keep seeing that meme that says something like, there's only 3 months left in this decade, trying to make me feel old and whatever. But that is crazy. So anyhow, I don't know how you guys do your holidays, but we've started doing holidays different. We probably started, a while ago. Probably about 5 years ago, maybe a little bit before that, just trying to do something a little bit different. When you have a large family like we do, holidays aren't exactly the funnest of times just because, you're broke. So if you've already started out being primarily, for the most part, a one-income family, and you've done that so that you could, stay home. That's what we did. We did it so I could stay home, so I could raise the kids. Not alone, but you know what I mean. Anyhow, but I also homeschooled all of our children. And so we had that ability. It did mean we were broke majority of our lives. And so holidays were not really enjoyable just because I really like spoiling people. I don't care who you are. That's not true. I do care. But I mean, with the kids and family, I really, really want to get them things that they would enjoy and they would like. I tend to make a lot of things. I'm a really fabulous cook and baker. I don't say I'm fabulous about a lot of things, but I will say that I am good at that. And so I really enjoy when people get to eat stuff that I've made and, makes them smile and stuff like that. In fact, it's really weird because I've decided that we have a problem in our household if our family just gets excited about my food. We get birthdays come around, and for birthdays, the deal that we do, because I don't do big parties, because with 7 kids, big parties is freaking expensive. So it's just like the annual birthday celebration for each of the kids or, the parents. And it's whatever you want for dinner and whatever you want for dessert. And then we come together as a family, and eat together and all that kind of stuff. It's something that doesn't happen all the time, so we make sure we try and do it then. And we'll have like a movie night. On occasion, we'll go out. Like, one year my daughter wanted to walk across the Golden Gate Bridge as a family, and we did that. So anyhow, we do holidays different. We do celebrations different a little bit in our household. Part of it is because of money. But during the holidays, we've started doing things different. Just a lot of it has to do with, it's just, I feel like holidays aren't what they were intended to be, or maybe they shouldn't have been a thing at all. I don't know. It just becomes this big thing about spending money and feeling obligated. And, if you didn't get for this person, you're going to feel bad. And if this person didn't get for you, and no one wants to explain things like, man, I don't have money to buy for my entire family and everybody else's family. And then what is even the point now anymore? I don't even know. So we do things a little bit different. First of all, we don't really say Christmas. I mean, I'll say it for the sake of somebody else to make them feel better or whatever, comfortable or whatever for understanding. But we say holidays and we don't spell it like HOLLER. Well, maybe sometimes we do. Well, anyhow, I make challah bread for celebrations. I make it during the holidays. So we started calling it challah, like challah. Got to do that phlegmy CH of the word challah bread. And so then we just started calling them holidays. And so I'll do stuff on what is typically Thanksgiving Day, although I'm not really a big fan of that holiday in general, but I like the food. Is that terrible? The idea surrounding the holiday. Oh, we can get into the side of this. People aren't going to like this, but yeah, we're celebrating that we came in and raped and pillaged. Yay. No, bad. So I enjoy coming together and having a designated time of the year to hang out and spend time with those that I love and express that to them through my food. So that's what we do for the holidays. And so last year I started something a little bit different, and man, I hope I have the, endurance to do it again this year, but I did a Puerto Rican feast. My kids are a whole mix up of ethnicities. Half of them is white like me. So a lot of French and Irish and some other stuff. Anyhow, from their father, though, they've got Puerto Rican and Portuguese and Filipino and a couple other different things there that I'm not. And in addition to that, he's from Hawaii. So we try to kind of, when we are able or in any way we know how, to make sure they have a little bit of experience of the different culture or foods or whatever in any way that I am able to recreate or their dad is. And so one of those things was I really wanted to make pasteles because they're really hard to find here. And so when we lived in Hawaii, we could get them periodically, but obviously we're not living in Hawaii anymore. We're back in California. So it's hard to find them, and it's hard to find them fresh, and it's hard to find good ones. So I said, screw it. I'm going to do a bunch of research. I was watching videos, all this other crap, and I make them myself now, and they are really good. I'm good at this. I did good. So what in the heck does my babbling on about holidays and food have to do with anything? Well, a lot of holidays, that at least the ones that are celebrated in America, and that's the only experience I have, is focused or centered or originates from some sort of religion, Christianity primarily, or Catholicism, whichever you want to call it. And today's topic that I want to discuss has to do with the church. And I don't mean one specific church in general. I mean the church. And I want to discuss why I excommunicated myself from the church. So I should probably give a little background. I was pretty much raised in the church, Lutheran church. We started going when I was probably around the age of 5 or 6, something like that. And around the age of 8, I started going to the school. It was a small private school that our church had. Really small. My graduating class, I think when I graduated from 8th grade from there, was something like 11 kids. So we were a really tight-knit group, really, close bunch of kids. We all still know each other and have some form of contact. Well, most of us do. Via Facebook and things like that. So started my life there. I spent a lot of time there, all the midweek things and all the youth activities, and a period of time my parents were working with high school ministry, and I did all that. I was in the choir, and I was a puppeteer. We don't need to go in that. And then I was in, did the plays, and I played all of the sports, and, all of the groups of friends and everything we had were pretty much coming from that church. And then when I got older, became an adult and started a family, that continued on. And we were very heavily into the church and the activities. And then we even started working with youth ministry. I actually had worked a little bit with youth ministry prior to even starting a family. And that continued forward. We worked in youth ministry. And then I dug out. If you were to look like a general timeline, that's kind of what it would look like. It's obviously a lot more detailed than all of that, but a very general, brief timeline, that's what it would look like. Growing up, did this, youth ministry, left. So growing up in the church, I remember being very confused by many things. I remember being confused by the rules and rituals. I remember being very confused as to why people behave so differently on Sundays or any church event than when we saw them any other night of the week, like just in general, having dinner, hanging out, or at the store or whatever, I remember thinking, well, they behave differently, they act differently, they talk differently. It was, there were things I knew that were going on, but we don't discuss those things because heaven forbid anybody know what's really going on in anybody's life. It was, there was a lot of hidden things and agendas and hypocrisy. And obviously I didn't know those words back then when I was young, but I saw it. Pay attention, guys, because kids see these things. They know. The speech was even different. There was a lot of judgment and condemnation, especially for those who weren't, quote unquote, I'm going to use some Christianese terms here, saved. There was a lot of issues with sex. Oh my gosh, sex. As if it's so crazy how much time was spent on do not have sex and never really explaining why. It was just do not have sex. God doesn't like it. You're going to go to hell. No, no, no. And then in addition to that, homosexuality. I grew up in a time where things like that were definitely taboo and definitely not okay to discuss and definitely not okay if you were in the church. And that was really confusing because I also knew that we had people that we knew outside of the church that were not straight and they were friends. And so I was a little confused because I'm like, okay, at church, when these things are brought up, it's like, oh my gosh, they're straight Satan themselves. But here we're pretending as though we didn't just have these conversations at the church. And it was all very, very confusing to me because I grew up feeling as though I needed to hate those things, fear them and hate them. And it really created in my mind and in the way I made decisions, it created an idea that was very confusing for me, but also I took on and I perpetuated. Recently, I was speaking to someone who I've been very good friends with since we were very young. I think we first met around the age of 5 or 6, something like that. And now we're, in our mid 40s. And we were discussing what life was like for us back then because we went to the same school, went to the same church, etc. And we were discussing that it felt as though we were irrelevant. Our voices were irrelevant. And when she said that to me, I was like, oh my gosh, okay, that's the exact word. That's exactly what it was. It did feel as though because you were a kid, you didn't know enough, or you don't need to question, just have faith. Or just listen because we said, or because God says. There wasn't any, explaining. And so what happens is you hear that a couple of times as a kid and you don't ask anymore. You don't question anymore. You just, okay, well, that's what mom and dad said, or whoever, the pastor or your youth pastor or whomever the adult was in your sphere at that time. And you just listen and you obey blindly. So that gives an idea of the brief questioning I had starting from a young age, but I didn't do much with that until probably about, like I said, maybe 10 years ago, and then coming to a greater understanding of it about 5 years ago. And when I say I excommunicated myself from the church, it wasn't one of those things where I went in and did some grand hurrah inside the church building or anything like that. It's what I've chosen personally. Let me preface by saying, I do believe there is a divine creator. I know that. I do know for myself that I have been divinely created. I have a divine path and that I need to find that and that I cannot find that in another human being, blah, blah, blah. I know these things. But what I have excommunicated myself from is the church and Christianity. What I have found in my experience is that all of these things that the church does and the things that you hear with regards to Christians and Christianity are deeply rooted in tradition and rituals, but I don't think that they're deeply rooted in what the actual word says, the book, the Bible. And I don't think that there's a great understanding. I think there's a lot of cherry picking of verses. And for those that don't know what that means, they see a situation with someone, oh, they need to hear this one. oh, this one's a really good verse for so-and-so. Oh, this, oh, God said this and this is what they're doing. So, here's how we're going to handle things because traditionally, ritualistically, religiously, this is how we do things. And that it has become comical to me because what is missing is the freedom. I am free. That is strewn throughout the book. Freedom. I am free. I am free. And that means I am free of your judgment, free of your condemnation, free of your choices for my life because it's not yours. This is my life, a divine path that it can only be given to me and understood by me, not by anyone else. I don't know yours. You don't know mine. Quit telling me, this is what I felt, what I am supposed to do when there's no possible way you know what is right for me. The amount of judgment and hypocrisy is probably one of the first things that stood out to me early on. And it was a really difficult, thing to navigate because someone cherry picks a verse for you and they tell you, oh, this verse right here says you aren't supposed to do this and you shouldn't hang out with people that do that. And that's where it ends. It's just, okay, so that's it. We were in places where we were actually told, sat down and told, this person and this person and this person cannot be in your life. We were actually in places where when we left the church, and we didn't leave on negative terms, we just said, you know what, it's time for us to move on. We're going to be moving to another assembly. And they said, oh, we love you, blah, blah, blah. We left that, and within 24 hours, other members of that church had been called, notified, sat down, whatever you want to call it, and told, do not speak to Aaron and Corey Ascension. They are no longer of the fold. They are no longer allowed to reap the benefits of the church and the people within the church. On and on, made up stories. Oh my goodness. It was insanity. And you know what's even crazier? I stayed. Not at that church specifically, but I stayed. And I stayed because of tradition. I stayed because of personal religious ritual. I stayed even while I questioned all this. And it was crazy for me. It was such a conflict because my personality is pretty opinionated. I'm pretty much the one who's going to check someone or question things. And I didn't. I did internally, but not outward. And what it started to create in me when I was seeing judgment that went way beyond just the example I just gave, I started to pull away then. I became very bitter. I became very angry. I became very judgmental. It was such a confusing time. I have a pretty firm dislike for the word hate when referring to another person. And so for most of my life, I was told, if I said I hated someone, my mother would say, well, you want them to die? Because that's what that means. If you hate someone, you want them to die. And I've never felt that way. Never disliked someone so much that I wanted them dead. I never wanted them to die, and I didn't want their family to feel that. I never wanted that. To this day, it still rings true. I say the same things to my children because in essence, I do believe that when you hate someone, when you really, truly hate someone, you don't want them to live any longer. And I have no desire to be a part of that. So I will frequently say, no, I don't hate that person. I might not like what they're doing. I might not like the things they're saying. I might hate those things. But the person, no, I do not hate them. And so because of that, this idea of judgment, which was obviously based on lack of understanding and fear, which then because they feared it, they hated it, whatever it was something the person was doing, how they lived their lives, who they were, what they looked like, whatever. Well, that meant then that they wanted them dead. And so that's still how I feel. I know I'm a grown-up, but I still feel firmly that to hate another is to wish them dead. And so how confusing was that for me to hear from the church these things that were so vile, so hateful, so condemning, so judgmental. They truly looked as though they wanted someone dead. And I still see that today. especially when you talk about things with regards to marriage of same-sex individuals and anything that has to do with the LGBTQ community. You see that hatred. And I have no desire to even be remotely associated with anything that desires the death, that hates so much someone who I truly believe, again, divinely created, a divine path, and is here for great purpose. Fear-based indoctrination. Raise your hands high if you remember thinking you might go to hell because you didn't obey mom or dad, or because you didn't ask Jesus into your heart when everybody said you had to, or because grandma died and they wanted to make sure you were going to go there. Raise your hands high. Fear-based indoctrination. Causing someone to fear so that you can get them to do what you want has absolutely nothing to do with that which is ethically and morally correct. It is wrong. What's even crazier than just saying it's wrong, it's oppression. It's taking someone's freedom away. It's saying that you know what is better for them because you said so. No, but this is like a cornerstone of Christianity in the church. To bring about this fear, and then that it spreads. Everyone's afraid. It's so weird. And it's weird because at the same time as they're causing you to fear, without using that word, by the way, they're telling you there is no fear in him being the divine creator. And so after years, I've come to this understanding, I don't know who that God is that they speak of. He is not my creator. What needs to end is the telling of other people what they need to do with their lives, how they're supposed to live. That's not your job. It never was your job. It needs to end. The idea of telling another person that the things that they're doing in their life are wrong, it's not your job. Your job is one thing, and this goes across humanity, whether you have a religion or not. Love, without condition, without condemnation, without judgment. And I truly believe that people struggle to know what that is. And I'm pretty positive that those within the church have no idea what that means. I mean, think about it from just like a human standpoint. If you want to get to know someone, and the first thing that they do with you is tell you, well, one, you're going to hell. They tell you that you are not part of this group, but you need to be part of it. They cause you to become fearful. They cause you to hate who you are. They cause you to question everything about you, who you are and what you do. They cause you to believe that you shouldn't be around your own family, friends, co-workers. They tell you that if you work on Sundays, that you are not pleasing in the eyes of God. How in the world would you ever really truly consider being a part of that? Why would I ever? It's gross. No. Here's why you would choose to. Fear. It's like some sort of preying on the minds of the weak. It's like a Jedi mind trick. When we were working in ministry, one of the things that we would regularly hear about was the need for converts. And it was, at this point, I'm beginning to see the inner workings of the church. And I was constantly hearing about converts and altar calls and baptisms. And they wanted to know why more kids weren't, giving their lives over, praying the prayer, professing salvation. Why wasn't that happening within our specific groups? And it began sounding exactly like a business transaction. It was like quarterly report time, guys. Let's see how much money we've made, or AKA how many kids have said that, based on fear, that they're going to be saved now. It was so strange for me. And that's when I started pulling myself away, just more inwardly pulling myself away, becoming very bitter and angry as well, because I also saw that we were seeing communication with these kids that I didn't think anybody else had. We were relating to them, and them to us. Maybe that was because we were younger, but also because we wanted them to feel like they were actually truly human beings, that we cared. And that's not what was happening behind the scenes. The request for numbers and the anger at what we spoke on, because it didn't fit the agendas that the church had. I had a great compassion or empathy for the outcasts, because there was plenty of them. They didn't dress like, look like the other church kids. Their parents weren't necessarily ones that had money or a standing in the church like other ones did. And they tended to be the ones that were viewed as problem kids. And it was really hard for me because I heard the comments made and I saw the sideways glances, and I felt the tension when when these kids would just walk into a room solely based on their circumstances or appearance. And it killed me, because what those kids needed right then was someone to just come alongside them and let them know they were loved, that their situations did not define who they were. They needed to know that they were actually wiser, because what I saw in these kids, and even in adults that we dealt with as well, they were able to see beyond this veil, this obscurity of the church that had been created to hide the inner workings, to hide the hypocrisy and judgment and lies. They were able to see that, but see, they were viewed as a problem because they were fighting back against this agenda that was being impressed upon them. It was painful to be a part of that. It was like you could see this life being taken from them. And it was because they were now under the impression that they were of less value because of their situations or their circumstances or their choices or what they looked like. I didn't want my children to become part of that. I didn't want to be part of that. And so you have these people facing huge issues, whether it be society-related issues, personal issues, spiritual issues, whatever it was. But because they were not what everybody viewed as the proper Christian thing to do or say or think or feel, they couldn't communicate with anyone. They were left to the wayside to just waste away. Now, occasionally you would see someone attempt to communicate with them, but it was always just this fearful, judgment-based thing. And there's no way that these kids or adults would open up to somebody like that. If they have these feelings and these thoughts and these questions, and they're seeing what's going on in the world around them, but they're inside of this community with these walls and these boundaries of don't even discuss it. It is never to be brought up. Hell, hell, hell. Man, you cannot do that to a person. That's not freedom. There's no way you're going to eradicate fear from not bringing about any type of understanding. Their situations, their emotions, their feelings, their desires are not invalid. Yet that's what was made very clear. They were irrelevant. They were invalid. They were hell-bound. They were possessed. Whatever. And again, I wanted nothing to do with that. We are currently in a social climate of hatred. And I firmly believe that hatred is based on fear that's been indoctrinated or is being embedded in us right now in the system. And it's interesting to me how often I have to hear, oh, this country was based on God and Christianity, and this is why we have to make people stop doing this and that and the other thing. And I don't really understand why anyone would believe that's the proper way to deal with another person. Because you paint this picture as if, oh, this isn't ethically and morally sound, and God says this and God says that. But at the same time, as you're doing that, you're literally oppressing people. You are removing their freedoms. You are not seeking to gain any understanding at all. So you're creating an environment of fear, of hatred, of desire, of eradication of groups of people based on your own personal agenda. Oh gosh, another big topic I wanted to touch down on was sex. Fear, indoctrination, and sex. My gosh. I remember hearing about, God does not want you to have sex prior to marriage, prior to that little piece of paper. Otherwise, you're going to hell. And there wasn't a lot of discussion about, hey, wait a second. Sex is good. Sex is very important. Sex has nothing to do with anybody else but you and whomever it is that you happen to be having sex with. And sex is not just for men. Sex is not just to procreate. And sex is really quite wonderful when you remove fear and when you remove other people from your pants. So, for example, the church should not be in your pants, shouldn't be in your bedroom. They have nothing to do with what you do with those areas of your body. Now, let me just say, I do think there is wisdom in teaching people and your children, hey, be wise. There's lots of reasons why you should be wise. But with regards to sex, yeah, there should take some wisdom, take some consideration. There's a lot of things involved here that sometimes you don't see till later on in life. I wish I could go back in time and talk to my children about sex a whole heck of a lot more. I talk about stuff today and they're totally disgusted by it and they want me to shut up. But what I mean is I want them to know that they can talk to me about anything, that everything that they're feeling and they're thinking and their desires is normal and that it's okay, and that if they've already had sex, it's no big deal. We can address that too, and that I still love them no matter what. I wish that I could talk to them about real specific things like what the hell is a blowjob and the missionary position and oral sex. We were actually at a point in church where there was a couple that was telling people to not have oral sex because it was sodomy and God frowned upon it. And, well, that couple's not even together anymore. But in all of this, telling your kids or telling adults, whatever, just because you had sex does not mean you're going to hell. Just because you've chosen to love someone who is not the typical norm that everybody says that you should love, that does not mean you are not loved. That does not mean you are not of great value. The church was all up in my bedroom. And I don't mean specifically that church that we went to. I mean in general. The church and Christianity as a whole is all up in everybody's bedroom and in their pants. I'm trying to understand why. Because here's my reasoning for questioning it is, first of all, if any of you have actually paid attention to anything in the Word, it's pretty clear that judgment is not your business. You have no business in judgment. And then in addition to that, it's very clear that you are to love without condition, without judgment, without condemnation, literally every single solitary person. And so then the other thing I want to know about is, why are they so curious about what goes on with my vagina? I do not understand that. Why do you care what happens privately when you're not involved in it? I'm not asking you to step on in. I'm not asking you to watch, nor is anybody else. Just because someone happens to like someone of the same sex, that does not mean, and I'm pretty certain they're probably polar opposite, like opposed to it, they want you to join in with them. What is really wanted is just love. Everybody just wants to be loved. It doesn't mean that you have to like everything everybody does, but it doesn't even matter whether or not you like it because it's none of your business. This is literally zero of your business. It doesn't affect you. What your neighbor is doing privately with someone, that's none of your business. Not at all. If I don't want someone to tell me what to do with my life, then I surely cannot expect that someone wants me to tell them what to do with their life. And that's really one of the big problems within the church community. They feel as though they have a right to tell everyone how to live or how to not live, and that they, for some reason, are the judge and jury on everybody's aspects of their lives, on morality and what is or is not ethical, which is comical to me. I mean, currently we have this sitting president who the Christian community is supporting, and just on the topics I just listed off today about all the judgment and hypocrisy I received and watched many others receive for majority of my life, they condemned. But for some reason, for this guy who's running the country, everyone's cool with that? No, that doesn't even make any sense. What needs to occur is a breakdown, a revolution, in a sense, of these traditions and these rules that are not based on love even remotely. And see, the deal is breaking down norms and barriers means breaking traditions and rules that created these quote-unquote norms and barriers. Change cannot be created from the repetition and perpetuation of those exact same traditions and rules. Today was a difficult topic to tackle because there's so many different facets of things that I know for a fact are wrong, that are causing great harm to our entire society. But I couldn't touch down on absolutely every single solitary thing because I would be here for hours. But the issues that I did address are some of the primary ones that I know are having an effect, and it is going on and on, generation after generation. And these things, they need to stop. That's why we need to stop. We need to break down these traditions and rituals and barriers and find out what the truth really is. Because right now, I have news. It is not the truth that is being perpetuated. The truth is there is no man nowhere on this planet that has the position or authority to place judgment. There is no man or person on this planet who has the right to tell another person how they are supposed to live their life. There is no man or position of authority on this planet who has the right to tell another person who they should love. No man or woman on this planet owns that position, and that includes the church and Christianity. Do not be confused. I hope in listening to today's episode that you would choose to look at it from the eyes of understanding, and instead of looking at it through the eyes of offense. I think you have a choice to be offended or not offended. Take a look, see, consider your actions, your thoughts, your beliefs, your rituals, your traditions. What are they based on? Are they based on something that you've just done for years over and over and over and over again because somebody said so somewhere? Have you thought at all about what you think and what you believe and how you impress those things upon another person? Is it right? Is what you're doing the truth? Is it fair? Is it just? Is it love? And as you do these things, especially as an adult, and you raise your children, are you raising your children teaching them that they just need to love without condition? And that just because someone chooses to live a life different than them does not then mean that they need to fear it or to hate them. Changing these viewpoints on my entire life has been very humbling. It's as if starting over, and it's really difficult sometimes because when you get caught up in tradition and ritual that you've done your entire life, it's like you're a newborn baby and you got to start over and you got to learn everything new and you've got to, understand things that you never even attempted to understand before. And so I'm hopeful that somebody out there will do the same thing and we can grow through this together because I'm still learning. I'm still figuring things out. I'm still trying to understand. Thank you for listening today, and That's Not Proper. And please go to my Facebook and my Instagram and my Twitter, That's Not Proper, or email me, That's Not Proper Corey @gmail.com. Please share, subscribe, like, comment, give me some feedback. I'd love to hear from you. And I will be discussing more next week on That's Not Proper.